Hey guys, today let's play the game Things That Have Aged Poorly and Also Have Something in Common. I'll go first. The Hindenburg. Tragedy, awful, terrible. You know, now we don't get steampunk blimps in our cities. And I also guess there was a human loss of life, but you know, happened a long time ago. I think we can make jokes about it now. All right, your turn. Oh, blackface. That's pretty good. Turns out dressing up as a different race will offend that race. Who knew? All right, I'll go again. I'll do you one even better. All these three things now have something in common. All right, Shane Dawson's apology video. Not only does it have to deal with some racial faux pas, but it is also crashing and burning, much like the Hindenburg. Honestly, history is just like poetry. It just has a certain way of rhyming. You know, when you really think about it, history is like a bad Shakespearean fan fiction. Speaking of things that wax poetic, I could sit here for about the next 10 minutes and wax poetic about Shane Dawson and this drama, and I will, because everybody's doing a video on it, and for some reason FPS Diesel did a video on Shane Dawson a week before anybody would care about Shane Dawson. But I think I'm gonna come out and say it, you know, from a mental standpoint, I really don't care. Yeah, believe it or not, turns out that commentary channels make a lot of videos on things they don't care about. I'm just gonna tell you that I don't care about it. If you guys are longtime viewers of the channel, you might realize that I spend a lot of time on my channel trying to dissect the content a creator produces, because I think through that long form piece of art, and I do believe a YouTube channel is a piece of art, and people can debate me on that, but that's what I think. Now, I think that channels show certain themes and ideas, and I've used that in my arguments before, using the film knowledge that I have to convey my point, okay? Now, Shane, he's in a bit of hot water right now. I don't know if you've heard. But I feel that I can glean some truthful insights about Shane Dawson based off of his content. You know, and honestly, I could have probably been the one to make the hit piece video that would ruin Shane Dawson, but I chose to not do that because apparently I like being poor. But whatever, my channel is one Doomer episode away from saying that we need to legalize dueling. All I'm saying is that if Tati and Jeffree Star got in a ring, it'd be a much more interesting time. Also, could you imagine those cat claws going at each other? It would be hilarious. Regardless, let's talk about Drama SmackDown 2020 in the year of our doom and destruction. I don't know who we're praying to, but he sure ain't listening. You know, being a man named Shane Dawson right now is probably one of the worst things you could be. Because boy, I didn't know that one man could single-handedly put back race relations so hard by making an O-face at one of the Smith children. Now, let me say this because I've been deliberately avoiding Twitter because it makes me want to just commit seppuku. But here's the thing, guys, right? How is this comparable to systemic police brutality? You know, I could just look out my window and see all the chaos happening right now. Let's look. Oh, that looks pretty bad. I don't think it was Shane Dawson that caused that, but don't worry, people have said he is that responsible. Look, I'm not stupid or saying that I was born yesterday or something, but you realize how ridiculous that sounds, right? There are people that are doing that. Look, guys, if you want to fight systemic injustices by issuing death threats to Screaming Drama Queen on Twitter, go right ahead. Now, if you excuse me, I'm gonna go to Audible and yell at them for not making audiobooks for the visually and auditory impaired. All I'm saying is, you might be just edging your energy in the wrong direction. I don't know. I think if we're gonna focus on making change, that we don't do it from twitter.com yelling at a YouTuber when there are real problems you can deal with. But you know what? To each their own. I understand some of you are 14 and don't have a car, but you do have a Twitter account. Now, speaking of my former videos on Shane Dawson, if I really wanted to, I could position those videos in a way that turns Shane Dawson into the weirdest grape joke maker on planet Earth, and also with like a bunch of other things, considering that the book seems to be aged at people's aged 14 to 18. Here's the thing though, I didn't do that because it didn't really seem like the point of the book. Like if I wanted to, I could have spent the entire time of the book talking about all the horrendous racist jokes that are in it, or how about all the date grape jokes, or how about all of the jokes that are about the gay community. Instead, I decided to use those as a springboard to talk about how Shane Dawson feels about himself in the context of the world at large. But if I wanted to, I could also turn around and talk about how that book is just the equivalent of Mein Kampf, and talk about how Shane Dawson is turning people aged 14 to 18 into whatever word we're using now to describe people we don't like. Point being here is that the book was positioned as a kid's book, right? But it was filled with more swear words than an FPS Diesel video in 2020. For what it's worth, I will say this about Shane, is that his comedy comes from a point in time when offensive for offensive's sake was still considered funny and not out of the normal. His old videos were filled with stuff like that, and I did watch a lot of his old videos, and I did say to myself, oh, this is kind of offensive, but I didn't really think anything of it because, you know, I tend to not really get bothered by that sort of thing, even as somebody who is a minority. Except I'm not, you know, the specific race of minority who's allowed to give their opinions. Apparently, as a Hispanic, for some reason, people just like to decide my race on whatever the weather is. Don't know why that matters. Don't know why I get my race erased. But don't worry, I've been Hispanic since the day I was born. The thing is that when Shane makes a lot of offensive jokes, he always comes off less like a deliberate racist and more like the guy who's trying to fill an awkward silence in the room and thinks that offensive equals funny. You know, like somebody who watches South Park but doesn't realize that it's satire. You know, on one hand, I could look at a lot of those gay jokes in those old videos of his as him trying to discover his own sexuality, and I do think that is mostly the case for those videos. That is him struggling with that, and it's very clear, at least from my perspective and after reading that book and finding out where he is now versus where he was then. That's just where I come from there, and I'm seeing that. But the thing is, right, is that you can't really say that Shane is okay for having that kind of conversation with like a 12-year-old girl, right? And there's no excusing that, and I'm not gonna excuse that. I can tell you one thing is that Shane is not the type of guy to say it like it is. He's kind of the person to tell you passive-aggressively. Just for some reason, the beauty community has to all be passive-aggressive to one another. They can't say anything outright. Tati makes a video saying that James Charles is bad, doesn't say anything to prove it, right? Then Tati says that James Charles isn't bad, and that Shane Dawson and Jeffree Star are bad, and then she doesn't show anything to prove it. And I don't know about you guys, but I would just prefer if they got in a ring. That's all I'm saying. Same thing goes for Shane Dawson's apology, though. That thing is an incredibly passive-aggressive paper apology that he posted to twitter.com. Basically, you know, he was talking about James Charles eating humble pie. I'm sure we all saw it. We all know that that's a little ridiculous when he said that. Nobody deserves to be called that certain thing. You know, it doesn't need to happen. I don't know why, but it's almost comedic and, again, poetic how the shoe is on the other foot. Then he puts out that apology video, and guys, let me tell you this. If you're one of those people who thinks that that apology video is a genuine apology, okay, fine, whatever. I understand that we sit here and watch YouTuber apology videos all the time saying that they're unapologetic or not serious or not. But in this case, yeah, I don't think this one is realistic in terms of being an actual apology. Shane does things more or less because he feels kind of pushed by the public. Shane is a people pleaser, and we know that based off of the documentaries, right? We look at those documentaries, and those documentaries changed over time to fit the whims of the public, what people wanted to see in those documentaries. The documentaries were dictated by public. They weren't dictated by the artist. That wasn't his vision, it's what people wanted him to make. Shane Dawson is a people pleaser in every sense of the word. We know this. This is who he is. Shane Dawson talks about it in his book, how he has like no balls syndrome, where he'll just do things because he doesn't want to offend somebody else or do something for somebody else because that's the kind of person he is, and he can't refuse to say otherwise. Not my words, his exact words in his book. It makes the docuseries end up becoming this piece of pointless fluff, but it also leads me to sit here and think, well, did he do that apology because he really felt apologetic, or rather that he saw Jenna Marbles do it and he felt he had to, or he was never going to be able to work in this town again? And don't get me wrong, I understand his career is on the line when he does stuff like that. It determines who he can work with and what he can do in the future. But let's be real here. Mega corporations and companies say they care, but they really don't. Look, point being here is that Shane Dawson frequents the behavior of a people pleaser. You can see that in all his other videos. It just is part of who he is. And then the Tati video came out and it undid anything Shane tried to pull. Now, at this point in my career of doing this commentary thing, I don't think I can sit here and personally believe anything that Tati really says. Well, I can't believe everything, but I'm also not going to ignore everything she says because I have blinders on. These people all have their own separate motives and reasons for being in this situation, and it's important to understand those things and where they're coming from. Everyone has an agenda in makeup, right? I keep hearing from commentary channels that, you know, there's commentary channels are just, you know, bums fighting in the street, but then the beauty community is just, you know, like mob bosses, right? I'm not sure who said that first. It was either Willie Mack's show or Leafy, or it was both of them. I don't know. It's a small community at the end of the day. But I've heard a lot of people say it, and I do believe that's true. These beauty gurus have a lot of money riding on the line. It's probably one of the biggest mediums on YouTube right now. I mean, Look at the household names that are in it. There are people that just know who Jeffree Star is. And that's because Jeffree Star is like a legitimate celebrity. But James Charles, I've seen James Charles on billboards before, okay? Look, given everything that we've seen, and until somebody is able to prove it to me otherwise, it appears that Shane and Jeffree do seem to have something out it, like, against James. They want to put him down. They don't want that success. They probably see him as a threat. And Shane is probably an unknowing participant because of his people-pleaser nature, and we're gonna get to that. And this is just a gamer theory based off of how I'm reading and interpreting this situation, right? Which is basically what everybody's doing right now. But, you know, hopefully my opinion is different from those of the other channels right now, so let's see. But it appears that Shane and Jeffree did try to use Tati to make James appear to be the villain, so that way they could really get a leg up on the situation. Think about it this way. Shane is able to make an alternate version of its documentary that's a lot more hard-hitting and similar to that Jake Paul documentary, right? That really portrayed this villain of a character. If you're able to do that with James Charles, not only are you gonna get critical acclaim for making a docu-series with, you know, kind of a, I mean, like I compared in my other videos, you know, we need a Joe Exotic. I honestly said that Jeffree Star could be that Joe Exotic, and now I really do believe it. But Shane ain't the one to do it because he likes Jeffree, or he feels that Jeffree is his friend. I think Jeffree might be using him. You know, but not only does Shane get the critical acclaim of making this docu-series on James Charles, he gets to look like a hero too for outing this bad guy. This is a win-win scenario for him. All they need is for someone to pull the, you know, trigger, open up the situation, and then create this narrative about it. Now, if I'm gonna hazard a guess here, I don't think Tati was too personally bent out of shape about this, right? And here's what I mean, right? The gummies mattered. I know she says they don't, but they were part of it, right? These people are very much motivated by business. It's an important aspect of their job. They work very closely with the companies in this field, and these companies produce millions and millions of dollars a year. It's a huge industry. Of course they'd want somebody like James Charles on their payroll. He gets sales. The thing is that James is very successful in comparison to Jeffree right now. And to be honest, Jeffree probably doesn't want that. And Tati probably doesn't want that either. Everybody wants to be at the top, and there ain't enough room for everybody there. Jeffree probably saw this in Tati, and I'm just, again, taking a guess here, but I'm guessing that Jeffree took advantage of Tati's frustration with Shane Dawson. Shane Dawson. There's too many names involved. James Charles. Jeffree Star took advantage of Tati. I hate this. All right. Jeffree Star took advantage of Tati's ill will towards James Charles and basically fed her information until she made a video basically damning James. They were trying to ruin his career. That doesn't make Tati innocent, right? It still shows why she made that video, but it does seem completely likely that Jeffree and Shane would feed her this info. They both have motive for doing it. And don't get me wrong, this beef or like personal like problems you have with other YouTubers for their success is a thing that's real. It exists in the platform. You know, I've been on the receiving end of it. I've been on the sending out end of it. You know, I've gotten frustrated at certain peers because they're more successful than me. It's a function of this job. People get frustrated over the numbers. James and Jeffree are both men in the beauty space, and men in the beauty space right now, I mean, to be cold about it, are really big items. And I know that sounds really screwed up, but it's true from a corporate standpoint. You know, and let's be real here. James is a young guy. He's probably got more of a career left in it than Jeffree does. Jeffree will be fine. He makes money, but you know, there's also certain extra things you get for being the king of the beauty community, if you would will. And I assume that Jeffree would want to be at that top, considering he's a very successful businessman and has been in the game for quite some time. James is a threat to that. But again, that's just my theory. If I had to describe the dichotomy and this relationship between Shane and Jeffree, I'd really say it's like a Palpatine Darth Vader situation, you know, where Jeffree is Palpatine and Shane is Darth Vader. You know, he's being used as a means to an end, right, to serve a purpose. And I mean, let's look at what's happened right now. It really appears that Jeffree has dropped Shane like a bag of bricks, despite Shane even saying that he'd still stand behind his boy Jeffree, despite everything that Jeffree has done. In fact, a lot of people aren't standing behind Shane, really for themselves, except for Trisha Paytas, but I really don't know how much her word is worth anymore. It's not the most drama-filled answer to say that it was business that caused these decisions to be made, but I really do think that the emotions are just part of it. I don't really think that's the motive behind the people involved here. It really does seem more like Tati would have preferred if James was working with her hair vitamin brand, which is why she was angry at James, which helped push her to make the video. Jeffree wasn't happy with his success in comparison to where James was going, and he wanted to make sure that slowed down, so he remained the king of the beauty world, right? And Shane was following along with Jeffree because Shane is a people pleaser who can't say no and just refuses to have his own opinions on situations. Look, guys, the makeup palettes matter. The vitamins matter. That world is dictated a lot more by the business than I think a lot of people seem to give it credit for. Those influencers, while they might be loaded and rich, are on the lower end of the spectrum compared to the people that work on the board of executives for whatever makeup company we're talking about here. Plus, with Shane calling himself an empath and all this stuff, it seems more like he's, you know, kind of rightfully in the place to be taken advantage of by somebody who could use that well. I mean, it could be used quite well by tons of different people. So if you want me to give a TLDR right now, I think Jeffree is using certain relationships to his advantage, and they're really just happy little accidents that have formed into whatever plan he had that eventually came crumbling down. I don't really think there's as many people making and calling shots as some think there is. I do think Shane is a bit dumb, so I don't think he's the one pulling all these strings. I think he's just being dragged along by somebody else. It's just the view that I get from looking at Shane's content. Jeffree has a long history of being in drama and being this kind of soothsayer, telling people what they want to hear and then doing certain other things, you know, being kind of offensive behind closed doors in a much worse way than normal. Just tons of different things. He has a pretty large rap sheet. It's not that hard to go to that conclusion, I think. I know I'm not the only one. It just seems to make sense, and it seems to make sense that Tati would have been offended so much by the vitamin thing that it was a straw that broke the camel's back and sent her to make the video, and she just got fed all this info from Jeffree because maybe she was having conversations with Jeffree talking about how she was annoyed with James doing this or that or this or that. And so Jeffree took advantage of that situation to tell her certain things, and then Jeffree was like, oh, I have these certain things about James, Shane, you should make a video about it. Which also makes me wonder that there is an alternate version of Shane Dawson's documentary where James Charles was Kevin Spacey. And I don't know how far that got, or if it exists somewhere, or if Shane is sitting on some footage. That would be really interesting. But if he would like to exonerate himself, he is definitely in needing of doing that, like right now. Because I don't think it could get any worse for him, aside from him committing an actual crime. Look, all I'll say next is that Jeffree Star definitely comes off as a Thanos, and somebody should do something about it. And all I'm saying is that this is just my opinion, and that I cannot afford to be sued, and nor am I worth your time. Okay, I'm glad we understand each other. I'm a crazy person who lives in a basement. Nobody listen to me. I don't speak reason. I live with a tinfoil hat. I'm a crazy person. I will say this, though. I can't wait to see what Jeffree does next, because the guy has clearly got some skeletons in his closet. Now, if you'll excuse me, I guess I'm going to watch more hour-long streams of this, because why not? Head to toe. Said you got your own style, that's just slang for you, ain't got it though. Talking like you got it, that's a problem, I might let them know. Squeeze you like I'm Elsa, so my let it go. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Head to toe. Said you got your own style, that's just slang for you, ain't got it though. Talking like you got it.